Childhood Circles by Dr. Alon Giladi. A journey to discover happiness and meaning through flashes of childhood in the Israeli reality. The will to live.
My attacks of shortness of breath came more and more frequently. Along with them also came a new relationship between me and my two grandmothers. Relationships that I measured by a very simple yardstick. The ability to calm me down as quickly as possible. The talent to stop the suffocation, allowing me to return to my world, to silence, to the intoxicating peace of breathing air. My Tel Aviv grandmother would boil a pot full of water and serve it to me with a towel. I would put the towel on my head, bring my mouth close to the steam slowly rising from the pot, wrap my head in the pot in one fold and breathe. This treatment would calm the situation somewhat. Then my grandmother would approach the second and decisive treatment. She would sit by my side all night long and caress my back and head until my eyes would close peacefully on their own. My grandparents lived near Dizengoff Square in Tel Aviv when the square was still a square, surrounded by a road, as is customary at modern intersections today. Surrounded by people. Every Shabbat and holiday, the people of the area would fill the square, sitting on its benches, enjoying the sunlight and the company. My grandparents' apartment was on the top floor of the apartment building that stood right on the busy street, a back apartment that looked out over the rooftops and antennas of the city's buildings. At the bottom of the house was a pizzeria and a brothel. Almost every Friday, my grandparents would come to my parents' apartment from the small workshop in Jaffa, where they worked themselves and supplied yarn to the army. They would arrive with a big bag of burekas, brown eggs, and baskets full of all sorts of goodies. But I was interested in the bag, or rather a warm and very specific part of it. I would pounce on the burekas with a burst of speed, and the bag would disappear immediately. It was as if it had never been there. After a short stay, my grandparents would take my sister and me from my parents' apartment to theirs for a short drive in the old Beetle. We would happily drive from the quiet Tel Aviv suburbs into the heart of the city to the noisy and cheerful square. My grandfather would drive a Beetle at a speed that never exceeded 30 kilometers per hour. Drivers would honk their horns at him nervously from behind, but he was in control. That's how we would get on the bridge over the Haifa-Tel Aviv highway, gazing in amazement at the world below, at the Yarkon Bridge, at the small cars that passed beneath us. That's how we would rush at a fast pace in the old Beetle towards the city. My grandfather would drop us off at the apartment and drive around endlessly to find a parking space. It was evening, dark. Grandma, my sister and I would impatiently wait for Grandpa in the apartment, on the wooden chairs in front of the old turntable, the large radio that ran on lamps or on the old sofa. When Grandpa arrived at the apartment, we would get a few liras from him and go downstairs to buy the traditional slice of pizza. At that time, my grandmother would go to the small kitchen and start preparing the delicacies, her wonderful ones, for Shabbat. My grandfather would go to the small bathroom, wash his hands and face, sit down at the table opposite the old sofa, take off his glasses and read the newspaper in Bulgarian. Then my grandmother would serve him a cup of tea with a small pastry and of course the lemon, which my grandfather ate as it was, with its peel, with great eagerness. When my grandfather finished eating the lemon, my grandmother would go to him, clear the table, and go back to preparing the food for Shabbat. I loved my grandfather and grandmother, despite the huge generation gap between me and them. I loved them. Their warmth and insistence on finding the good in life, which was not simple and not easy in those days and in general. I loved them, even though I hardly spoke to them.